I was that dipshit that was tone deaf, that was pissed that I was losing a bonus. Now,
everybody has been that dipshit in their life. The point is, don't be that dipshit more than once.
You're listening to Let Me Speak to a Manager with Frank Cava and Ian Matthews.
What a crock of shit.
Yeah, that was hot mic, Sam.
It's 30 minutes away. I'll be there in 10.
Do it live! I'll write it and we'll do it live!
Frankie!
Ian, Happy New Year, you son of a bitch.
Happy New Year to you too, brother. We are recording this just after the New Year. It is January 7th, 2026. Have you written down 2025 on any of your signatures yet?
Not yet, but I'll tell you a fun fact. Do you know they're going to do 2 ball drops in New York City this year? It's not for Mandami. They're going to do one on July 3rd, going into the 4th for the 250th birthday of America.
Oh, that's really cool. Actually, you should come up. DC is doing a big deal for that birthday. Have you seen some of the light shows they're putting on the Washington Monument?
So I got an invitation. I know a guy who does all the events for the president, and his brother owns the events company. And he's like, "Do you want to come to the UFC match on the White House?" I said, "Yeah." I was like, "But I got to get 2 tickets." He's like, "Can you bring your wife?" I go, "No, bring it in."
Yeah, that'd be amazing. So can he pull it off?
Yeah.
Oh, that's sweet.
I'm on it.
That's sweet. But they did it. They did it for New Year's Eve, but they're going to do it again. But it looks like the Sphere, the hotel in like the outside where it's just a big movie. They've done that on the face of the Washington Monument. It's pretty badass, actually. I think it's cool the way they did it.
It's pretty sweet.
Yeah. So
we're talking about urgency today. Let's get urgent.
Yeah, Frankie, we are back to normal in that the Lions and the Dolphins are not in the playoffs. So a little bit more of what we're accustomed to. Something kind of triggered me to think about this the other day. Dan Campbell, the coach of the Lions, was being asked, because they won 15 games. They went 15-2 last year, and this year they dropped to 9-8. And a lot of people are criticizing our head coach and our general manager for kind of running with the same guys a second year. He was kind of loyal to the culture guys, even some of them that were a little bit older. And it fell apart. There were just way too many injuries, way too much pain. And when they were interviewing Dan Campbell, he said, what you all just need to know is I have an incredible sense of urgency right now. Like, I am motivated. We are going to do what it takes to get this back. And I always find it interesting that it is so hard to have a sense of urgency when you're winning. It's hard to make hard decisions when things are going well, when you're profitable, when you're growing. You kind of let things slip, you let standards slide. And sometimes it takes a good humbling, the way the Lions went through and Dan Campbell, it takes a good humbling, a missing of the playoffs to be able to look at your team and say, we're going to make some really hard decisions now, and we're going to get a sense of urgency. And sometimes it takes that, but it's also interesting that some managers are able to drive a sense of urgency even when they're winning, even when things are going well. I think in a lot of industries right now, there's no real disasters, but they're just choppy and they're not what everyone would like them to be. So executives are having a hard time convincing everyone to get out of their status quo mindset and to drive for more change, to push harder, to work later. And so I think this episode, we're going to talk about that. How do you create a sense of urgency with a team that you feel has grown complacent?
So it's funny where you went with this was Campbell in the NFL. The first place I was going to go with complacency is also the NFL, and it was a very different story, but similar in theme. The Dolphins continue to retain their head coach. Now, I don't actually kind of think it's a smart move. There's something to be said for continuity. They finally got rid of their general manager who's been with the organization for 25 years, and he is terrible. They have a quarterback who's tiny. They need an offensive line. They need a backup quarterback. They have neither. And so they've been really loyal to the wrong group of people. But if you do a half-ass internet research and you ask Gemini, what are the best run NFL franchises? They go Pittsburgh Steelers, Baltimore Ravens, Seattle Seahawks, New England Patriots, Kansas City Chiefs, Denver Broncos. The second one on that list is the Ravens. The first one on that list is Steelers. Steelers coach has been in place for 19 years, but he hasn't actually won a meaningful playoff game in more than a decade. The second one on the list is the Baltimore Ravens, who many people think is the most well-run organization in football. They were a dumpster fire in Cleveland who moved to Baltimore, but since they've come to Baltimore, they have been incredible. They've had 2 coaches in Baltimore. They've had 2 general managers, but they are both looked at as Hall of Fame caliber guys. And they just let go of their 18-year, over 600% winning percentage coach, and they let him go yesterday.
Top 10 in wins all time.
Yes, amazing. But if you really break it down, he hasn't had a meaningful win in the playoffs in almost 10 years. All of his playoff success, his significant playoff success, came in the first 5 years on the job. And although he is incredible, and he literally within 45 minutes of being fired, his agent had gotten 7 phone calls from organizations about inquiring about his services. He's going to get a job very quickly.
And he's 64, and they still will hire him. For
100%.
Sure.
But they're not going to be the top 7 people in the league who are going to hire him. The top 7 people in the league are letting him go. And the reason for that is it's really hard to keep a standard. And I think the Ravens have a standard. The Dolphins, I wish, had this standard. They do not. They're probably one of the 7 teams that called. But the point is, like, urgency and a standard being held, very similar to what the Patriots did. The Patriots have a standard. They bottomed out and have rebounded in a 5-year stretch of time. The Dolphins have been terrible for 25 years, and the Patriots seem to have had 2 dynasties built in that period of time because the people at the top are holding people accountable. So how does this work with the rest of society and normal people who don't own companies? You have to have an internal clock that pushes you, or you have to have internal urgency, or you'll fall prey to this. And I feel like what we have going on right now is there's just a malaise in the market for a lot of different reasons that we'll talk about.
So my first piece of advice for a manager or an executive or an owner that wants to drive more urgency, you can't do it from your office. You can't do it from the ivory tower. You can't do it from corporate. You've got to roll your sleeves up and get out in the field. If you want people to work harder and you want them to drive change, you have to be willing to go put the miles in to get out in the field, spend time seeing what they're seeing, living the way they're living. So the example I'm going to give here is kind of a high profile one, but just 2 years ago, OpenAI came out with ChatGPT, and they made a big announcement with Microsoft. And from the time it was announced, people were starting to say, Google's cooked. They're screwed. This OpenAI, AI in general, is going to kill search. Google's business model's out. How could Google, who were kind of the inventors of AI, how could they have let Microsoft and ChatGPT get a leg up on them? And the founder, Sergey and Brin are the 2 founders of Google, but they've largely been retired for years. They do philanthropic shit. But Sergey came back to the office, showed up, like posted up, and not in an executive role. He showed up as an engineer working on projects. He was coding. He was programming, which I think is badass because he's top 10 in the world in net worth, and he's programming alongside engineers. But in doing so, Frankie, showing up, working his ass off, not like just, hey, let me take some pictures and show people that this is important. He thought it was an existential threat. And so he dug in, and what he started finding is we're holding these engineers back. They couldn't use certain softwares because Google had something that competed with it. And he just started ripping policies and procedures out that were holding engineers back. The other thing he saw is work from home doesn't work. He couldn't get a hold of engineers. The communication was disjointed, and he knew it because he was in it. He was in the middle of it, and they couldn't find people all the time. They couldn't get people together. So he put out a memo. This was like a year ago. That was pretty much a, let's get back to who we are and our standards. But in that memo, we're coming back to the office 5 days a week. And he didn't stop there. He said the sweet spot of productivity is 60 hours a week. Too much more than that, and you're going to kind of burn out. Anything less than that, you're leaving something on the table. And we can't afford to leave anything on the table right now. This was a $2.5 trillion company, 5th largest company in the world when he sent that email out. But he was basically saying, you're either with me or you're not. We're okay if you don't want to come to the office and you don't want to work this hard, but we need people who will, and we're going to get rid of you if you don't. Fast forward 1 year from that memo, Google just released Gemini, which is now the #1 LLM. It is ahead of on every metric, it's ahead, and they are starting to run circles around ChatGPT. And Google should have always done this. They have the best engineers. It's not close. They have the best talent in the world. And it's funny, now you see OpenAI, Sam Altman coming out and sending an email out to his team.
That's what I was going to talk about.
Code Red, we're at war, right? Like this is a defining moment for us. It was just a year ago where people were saying Google was dead, and ChatGPT dropped its morals a little bit. So I love the fact that Sergey from Google came back and got in the mix. But I think any executive, if you want your people to show a sense of urgency, you can't do it sitting on your ass in your office. You have to get out to where the work is being done, see it for yourself, see why there's not urgency. And, it's the general going to the front of the line and pulling his sword out and saying, let's try. Like, it's just a different level of energy when the general is willing to fight. Because if you see that, you're like, oh shit, there's a good chance we could lose. He's fighting. Everyone rallies around that when a good leader gets out into the field.
So what I think is fascinating about Silicon Valley is the fact that they always think they can go extinct, and they all feel that way. So even somebody like Google knows that they can go extinct, and they can become very fast. You can go from the penthouse to the outhouse in that world. Everybody's aggressive. Everybody is smart. So it was 10.5 months ago where Gemini was still producing images of a black George Washington. That's how fucked their process was. And now they are dominant in everything. We were talking earlier today about building an LLM. You're like, yeah, do that. Just feed it through your Google. Like, Google's got an entire suite on this stuff because they are so incredibly smart. So I'll go to something very different, because I was going to use the Sam Altman all hands on deck example, but Ian did. So one of the things I'm encouraged about with this current administration, and I like it less than Ian does for disclosure, but I do like the fact that they are embracing Silicon Valley. And I like it for the fact that Silicon Valley is always in startup mode. And the US government is the complete opposite of startup mode. Like, I hired a guy who was working for the US government, and he couldn't understand that I fired him after 4 months because he'd already blown through all his PTO. Like, I'm like, this isn't the government, dude. Like, you got to work. But the startup, the scrappiness, the willingness to kind of be someone who will go in, roll up your sleeves and do the coding is the humility that it takes to be. It doesn't matter where you get your view of the world. It could be from the CEO suite, or it could be from coding, or it could be, in my case, of going on appointments or having a one-on-one meeting with different salespeople. But you have to understand what's going there and have empathy. And if you have the empathy and the understanding of the right part of the business, you can manage it the best way. So what we did in our business about 2 years ago to the day is we started implementing our daily calls, and our daily calls have revolutionized our business. They really have. Our conversions are up. The business itself has not really grown, but I can only imagine if we hadn't done that, how much we would have slipped. So you have to understand, and you got to get in there and get the details. And everybody I know who's a good owner, I know good owners that do the businesses that I run. I know people that run restaurants. They all have channel ways into achieving and understanding a real honest assessment of what's happening in the business. And they're very relatable.
Love all that. I don't have anything to add. I think the other piece of it, I feel when I have a sense of urgency is when I'm feeling pressure. Pressure is such an underused management tool. And as part 3, I want to get into the balance of pressure and retention. But I don't know if you ever read about the CEO of FedEx when he was starting FedEx.
Years ago.
Yeah. So he, like most startups, that business is a high capital business, running a logistics company like FedEx. You got trucks, you got warehouses, hard to prove out, and you're competing against the post office. So he was trying to get his, 5th round of funding, but it had dried up. People were like, listen, this doesn't work. You haven't proved the profitability yet. You've gotten close, but you're not there. And he just needed to get to a place where he could get the next round, because he still believed in the business, still believed he could do it. So, so many of these stories, Elon Musk has a dozen of them, where he was a week from running out of cash and found something out under pressure. But this FedEx CEO was a really good gambler. And he went to the high stakes single deck blackjack tables in Vegas, and up and down, finally won 50,000, which is what they needed to get through payroll for another 2 weeks. And that 2 weeks bought him enough time to secure enough debt to fund the rest of the operation. And he never had to raise again. But it's interesting when he talks about it, he's like, it seems crazy in retrospect that I would do something so reckless. He's like, but pressure makes you do some crazy things. And I had a sense of urgency. And I think organizations that apply pressure at the right places at the right times, they just seem to have more creativity. You're bringing up Silicon Valley. Yeah, there's always a sense of urgency there because the whole idea of the tech space is to disrupt. And that means that we just disrupted someone else and put them out of a business. We know exactly what can be done to us. There's not a lot of people that sit on their hands in Silicon Valley because the pace of change is so incredible that everyone always feels pressure to go faster. And if you're a startup, it's don't run out of cash. If you're an incumbent, it's don't let this new startup come and steal our business. I think pressure, Frankie, and I'm interested to hear how you use pressure to help people feel. No one's ever going to feel your sense of urgency as a business owner, understood. But how do you use pressure to help the rest of the group understand a sense of urgency?
So I'm going to answer your question in a very different way. So I was having this conversation with my wife, who is an academic. Do you know what the definition of an academic is?
No.
According to my wife, not according to Google.
Anything I would say would be insulting to Ellie, so I'm not going to answer.
So according to my wife, an academic is someone who learns for the sake of learning. And then she had the caveat to that, without financial benefit, but they just want to learn. So the reason I bring that up is everything that I am motivated by has an economic component to it. And nothing that my wife is motivated by has an economic component to it. Like she'll sit in the back sunroom and she'll work on something for 6 to 24 months. And I don't get it. Like, I'm like, what the hell are you spending your time on? But it matters to her. And it matters because it's for the sake of learning something that someone hasn't learned before, understood. So I use that story for this reason. You have to understand the intrinsic values of the person you're trying to motivate, or you're going to fail. So if you try and use money motivation for my wife or anybody that she manages, you're going to lose. So like whenever we talk about managerial strategies, nothing in my life that I've ever done works with that crowd. The process is the same, but the carrot is very, very, very different. So in order to create pressure or understand people's pressure, you have to understand that everyone is different. They have very different pressures and you have to understand them because you cannot properly manage people with a one-size-fits-all model. And one of the things that I've always heard about myself as a manager that I'm good at is relating to people and providing the type of motivations that actually resonate. So if you're someone who's struggling in a new home community and you're managing people, you have to understand who you're managing and what drives the needle for them. That's part of it. The other side of it is I feel like everyone is slightly distracted right now. It's not exactly the COVID era, but it's very difficult. Like it's a difficult market. Like if you go to the front page today of The Economist, it says the angst over affordability. That's the front page of The Economist. Everybody feels it. Everybody, like even if you're like somewhere shy of the top 10% of earners in America, you feel it. So everyone is a little bit distracted or conflicted. And because they're dealing with their own pressures, their families. How do I pay for groceries? How do I pay for gas? So all of it, taxes are going up. The guy in the White House does all kinds of things that it makes me uncertain. So you have to really get to the root of what are we doing? And if you can get through the noise with the people that you manage, you have to understand the people that you're trying to serve in model homes or in any type of sales environment, they feel what you're feeling. So you have to do the same things. You have to just penetrate and talk to those people about what is important to them. And ultimately, what is it they're trying to solve by being in your model home or being in whatever situation that you're trying to sell to. It's that fundamental.
Love all of that. So going along with your management team and your executives being out, I think transparency is really important. I think if you as a manager are feeling a lot of pressure and you feel like your team doesn't have the same intensity, they might not know what you're going through. You might be shielding some of it, shielding some of how you're feeling, shielding the actual challenges that the company's up against. And I'll use an example from recently, really, in the last 6 months. I've had several conversations with employees on the front line in a company that's shrinking, that had a bad year profitability wise, bad year sales year, missed their plan. Wasn't a great year, right? Forgettable year. And one of the conversations This is late in the year. A manager complaining to me that they didn't get the same bonus that they got last year. And it was like, yeah, like, have you seen the sales reports for your company? Like, they've been really lousy for a long time. And the other person was complaining to me that they had been promised a promotion that never came that year. And it was like, well, why would they have promoted you? Well, because, the managers that were already here are pretty busy. And it's like, are they still busy? Like, they had planned for, whatever, 15% growth. And instead they shrunk by 25%. Why would they need more managers? They need less managers. But it's interesting. Both of these folks that I talked to, it was late in the year. Like, it wasn't early in the cycle, Frankie. It was already really obvious that the company was having a lousy year, a stressful year. But yet both these people, still all they could think about was themselves, which is Dale Carnegie 101. People really just see life through their own lens, right? Woe is me, I made less money. Woe is me, I didn't get the promotion I was promised. But it was almost like, can you believe this? This is some bullshit, isn't it? Like, they were almost like confiding in me. And I was like, no kidding. Like, of course, some of that would happen. It's a really crappy market. If you would peek outside your door every once in a while and get out of your own little sphere, of course, these things would happen. And it's like, you brought up home building and lending, mortgage lending, right? Those markets have been beat up for the last 2 years, big time, right? There's a big time affordability problem. Interest rates are not going to fix that. You've got prices need to get in line, and those industries are rough. They're shedding people. They're much less profitable. But in those industries, it's almost like all those folks were in a room. Someone opened the door and threw a grenade in, and the grenade went off. And some people got dragged out. They're not there anymore. The grenade killed them. But like, the people in the back that didn't take the direct hit, they're looking down and seeing they got like nicked by a fragment on their shoulder, and they're pissed about it. It's like, you were in a room where a grenade went off. You expected to just be completely unscathed. What makes you special? You're in an industry that had a little bomb go off. Of course, you're going to get hit a little bit by it, but it's without giving context and clarity. Here's where the organization is. Here's where our profitability is. Here's where our sales are. We were planning for this. From the top down to the people on the front line, they should know exactly where the organization is. And if the organization is struggling and going backwards, they should feel that sense of urgency and pressure that all the way at the top, the owner is feeling.
So you wrote something a few weeks ago that I really liked. It was called No Crying in a Casino. And it was very similar to what you just said, right? Like, I can summarize it. You went into...
Take one guess who said that to me.
I know who it was. Do you want to say his name? I mean,
Billy.
Yeah, no doubt. Like, as soon as I read it, like, I was 4 words in, I go, I know who said this. Point of the matter is, Ian had a conversation with one of his bosses, and the boss delivered the conversation is, there's no crying in a casino, right? But what he was getting at is, people were being paid bonuses for 2, 3, 4, maybe even 5 years of time because the wind was at their back, and they were probably being overpaid. But when the company was getting hit in the shins or getting the bomb had detonated, like Ian was just talking about, the company said, hey, we're not paying bonuses this year. And it really affected Ian too, because Ian was a lot younger. He didn't have the financial wherewithal he has today. And this is 10, 20 years ago. So to that end, like, it affected him too, right? So he could empathize with his staff because he felt it, but at the same time, he had to be a leader inside of that role.
Do you remember that, by the way? Do you remember when that email came out from our CEO saying bonuses are gone?
So I wasn't there anymore, but I remember talking to you about it. I was gone by then when that came out. What year was it? 11?
Okay.
What year was it?
2009 to 11, sometime in there. So
yeah, I was gone. But the point is, I do remember talking to you about it, talking to other people about it. But I had a guy who came up to me 2 weeks after COVID hit. So COVID hit like March 15th of 2020. And by March 19th, the unemployment report for that week was 15 million people had filed for unemployment that week. Mm-hmm. That is usually 200,000 to 300,000 people. And it was 15 million. So like, if you think of it from that perspective, it was like 75x a normal week. And I had some dipshit come up to me after I had just fired 40% of my staff. And he came up to me and said, hey, I need a raise.
Oh, like, my God. Yeah.
You and I have talked about this before. Clueless. He joined the unemployment line because I'm like, you're tone deaf. We just got rid of like 40% of our staff in a day. Like, we can't, like, we're in survival mode. And ultimately what happened is, people that stuck around, we had a great 2020. We had a great 2021 because interest rates and everything else but it took time. It wasn't 5 days later. It was 5 months later, like the dust settled. And it's like, okay, first you survive and then you get through it. So like what I think about with this is like, if you look at somebody who like talks about financial planning, if you are in financial like dire straits, the first thing they say is, okay, you got to stop spending. And then you have to really earn. Like those are the important things you have to look at from a broader context. It's like, first you got to make sure you're going to survive. Then after you're going to survive, you start talking about, okay, can I make survival just a little bit better? And then you can kind of go from
there. Kind of wrapping up this third point though, of driving a sense of urgency. I was that dipshit that was tone deaf, that was pissed that I was losing a bonus. Now,
everybody has been that dipshit in their life. The point is, don't be that dipshit more than once.
Yeah, when that email came out, I was so pissed off and I was hurt and I was embarrassed too that no one had told me it was coming out. And so my people were finding out when I was. But my boss gave me context when he said no crying in the casino and quit, pretty much grow up, get out of here. The company's fighting for its life. But my dad also gave me a lot of context because I called him and I was bitching. And he's like, yeah, we're shutting down like every auto plant. GM's gone bankrupt. Every steel mill's shutting down. I know guys in their 60s that lost their job with no retirement, and now they got to go find a job at Burger King. And pretty much my dad told me that day, like, you should be so grateful that you still have a job. Like, peek around at the economy, dude, and look around. I can't believe that you're in. It woke me up. It woke me up a little bit. Those two, who are two guys that I cared a lot about their opinions, woke me up. And I quit feeling bad for myself, and I had a sense of urgency from that day on. Like, I had a sense of urgency.
So I've told this story here before, but I think it's worth repeating here.
That's okay. No one was listening anyway, so you might as well tell it again.
So there's a sense or a consensus that the current generation does not look back, like they're kind of in the here and now, and like, who cares what happened before us? They're just really vocal about it, and we all know about it because of social media, but I don't feel that's any different than what it was like 25 years ago or 50 years ago. So the thing that I will tell you is, if you don't want to feel this way, you don't want to feel like the turd in the punch bowl, you don't want to feel like the person who doesn't understand, there's two ways to go about it. Number one is to read about history, read about what's happened, pick up books about economic cycles. Nothing is new. It all happens over and over and over again. And I've given 100 book recommendations on here about it. The other thing is, don't look down your nose at people who are older than you, but instead ask questions. In good times, ask questions about hard times. Ask questions about good times. I've got a fractional CFO who works for us, who's mostly retired at this point, but he's 76 years old now. Talk to him. Like, during the Great Recession, my business was really slow. And this is the part of the story I've told before. I spent a week with my grandfather. And I asked him about what it was like to be born in the Great Depression and what it was like. And he's told stories to me that none of his kids had ever heard. One of them was when bread had gone up from 10 to 11 cents for a loaf. His mom was crying to a point where she's like, we're not going to be able to afford to live. Like, that seems like such a penny. It's so insignificant, but it's 10%. It went up 10%. Like, that's a big deal. So if you start to listen to these things and kind of understand it, like Ian called his dad. His dad had been through layoffs. Ian's told me stories about like summers where they basically eat bologna sandwiches for all meals because his dad didn't have a job. Like, that's real. So like, you don't understand sometimes what you're dealing with, and it's actually a lot better than what other people are dealing with. I'll close with this, Ian. This is fucking hysterical. I had a conversation with Max, my son, and he was bitching about something. I was like, well, Max, do you ever go to bed hungry? And he goes, sometimes, yeah. And I said,
his definition of hungry is awesome.
You're looking for somewhere between 2,000 and 3,000 calories of extra sustenance right before you go to dinner. That isn't going to bed hungry. What that is that's just not being gluttonous. And he looked at me like, what the hell's gluttonous mean? But like, I'd had this conversation with Ellie and she laughed. She's like, yeah, of course. Like, the kid just had literally like a fourth dinner. No, but he has no perspective. He's 7. So you have to kind of understand like what's going on around you. How does it compare contextually to other things that have happened? And you got to understand kind of where we are in our place. And we all can get misaligned on this, but it's very quick. You got to check yourself in pretty quick if you want to relate and manage.
I'm feeling you, Max. I'm feeling you. I was just telling Frankie before this, I'm doing like a little 3-day fast, and I could go for one of those bologna sandwiches right now. I've been going to bed quite hungry, just like Max. But no, I'm not dying. That's not true hunger. The last thing that I would just say, if you want to create a sense of urgency, if there's not urgency at the frontline level the way you would like it to be, you probably have work to do connecting their work to the overall mission, to whoever it serves. And I'll give an example on this, Frankie, with our tech startup with Keep. So much work in the first few years was just design work. It was engineering. It was mechanical. It was programming. If you would have walked into our Keep office, very boring, bunch of engineers sitting at open desks and typing. Like that's what happened for several years. And then we started selling devices and we put them out into the ether. And the first, 200 devices we sold, it was hand-to-hand combat. It was just me. We'd run some ads and people would text and ask for more information. And I would call people and I would text them and David would call some people. Well, I ended up being the frontline customer service guy for those people because they saved my number in their phone. It was very different than the way we are today where we sell on Amazon and people don't meet me. But like looking back on it, there were times where David would get frustrated or Jonathan, our technical guy, that their team wasn't as engaged in the mission. But looking back on it, it was probably a miss. We should have made our engineers talk to those customers when they would complain about the device. We should have made them take turns staffing the customer service line early so that they would feel more urgency around fixing the bugs, fixing the problems, adding the features that people actually wanted rather than being separated a little bit. And I think if a company really wants to get a sense of urgency, they have to connect everyone's job to the purpose of the company, to the mission. I'll give you one last example in a big company that we did. We were struggling with customer service in my region, and we kind of put together a big initiative where we were going to take a selfie with every customer at every settlement desk. And whenever they closed, we would ask a loan officer and it started with loan officers, but we were asking anyone to go out there and take pictures. And they would send them to me throughout the week. And at first it was just a handful of, my favorite people that jumped on. And instead of beating up the people who weren't doing selfies, I would just send an email to the whole region with all of the selfies I got from the week before. And I'd be like, look at all these happy customers. That was it. Nothing negative, only positive. Love what you guys are doing out here. And every week, Frankie, for that whole year, I would get more and more and more. And it went from just the salesperson going and taking a quick selfie to my processors in there, my closers in there. The LO was taking an app, so I had to get the selfie, branch managers going in there. And the more of these selfies I sent out, the more it kind of made more people want to go meet with. I was doing it. If I was in an office, someone was there, I would go jump in the selfie and we'd send it out. We had a few with our president who got into a couple of them, but it kind of caught fire throughout the company and our service went up with it because people stopped seeing them as settlements and started seeing them as people getting a new home and how happy they were. And that's just
it's called changing the frame. You change the frame.
It's giving them purpose, right? Connecting their work to the overall company. If you don't have a sense of urgency, there's something missing there from an alignment perspective.
Something I don't talk about a lot is my maintenance department. So we're talking on Friday about our new deal we're putting together on the ADUs. And our maintenance department's a big part of this. So we have a lot of tickets. They're just open tickets. And we've got a lot of turnover with our staff because it's a tough job. It just really is. So one of the things that I was talking
people are naturally upset usually when you're talking to them, or at least agitated because something's not going well.
Yeah, and it's Section 8.
Like in warranty, right? You don't call the warranty to say, hey, what's going on? You call them to say my toilet's not working or I got nail pops or.
So even though the government pays about 80% of our 80% of the total rents we collect, sometimes in aggregate, sometimes if it's $1,000, they pay 800, you pay 200. On the 5th or the 6th, rent's late on the 5th and everybody pays on the 5th. So on the 6th, we get a ton of maintenance calls. And the reason you get a ton of maintenance calls is people just wrote a check and they want something for their money. Even though they're only paying 20% on average of the rent, like they want something. So like maintenance calls spike. It's a hard job and it never ends. So but the point of it is this. I was talking to Kaylee who runs a department and Kaylee's done an amazing job. Like she's done an amazing job. She's grown as a leader. You're going to work with her when we do leadership.
Is she going to be in the little group that you gave me?
You're going to love her. She's great. And she's done amazing stuff. And I'm also going to send one of my maintenance managers in, even though he doesn't really directly want to manage people. I want him to learn some of these strategies so he can kind of help with this. But The point is this: we were having these conversations, and one of the guys on the team was using some negative word association. And I said, okay, that's it. Order breakfast, pick a date. I'm coming in the meeting, and I'm going to go over all these words. We're going to talk about it. I mean, I'm going to make them talk about it. And if they don't want to volunteer, I'm going to call it out. And it isn't a junky product. It isn't, but it's not where I live. You have to understand who your customer base is, but you have to understand if you use that word, you're degrading somebody's product in their home. And you have to think about this. And you have to also understand what's the standard being set. We don't set the standard. We have to live up to the standard. We exceed the standard that's being set by Section 8. And most of our units are renovated, but some of our units are functionally obsolete. And there's going to be a different life cycle of that property. We don't put a lot of money into it because it doesn't make sense. We also have people who live in that house that have rents that are a third of market. So you have to understand these things and you have to reframe it. So what Ian did is get people excited with selfies. What I'm going to do is just justify why we make certain decisions and educate them. And the only person who can do it is the owner. So I'm going to sit in there and I'm going to go through it and say, hey, look, like, let's talk about one of those units. Okay, why is it in this shape? Because it's part of a development play that's long-term. So like, you have to kind of understand these things. We have this old man who's in his like late 80s. His son he's got special needs. I'll just leave it like that. He does not want to move. His rent is like $850. I was like, I can't do that, but I can go to a number. Like, what could you pay? And he's like, I could pay $1,300. Like, okay, it's still $700 below market, but we're going to provide you with a slightly different experience than people that are paying market, but he doesn't want to move. So we're kind of meeting him there. But if you don't explain that to the maintenance staff, they think you're doing something wrong, not something. So sometimes you have to just educate and talk through it. And then it's like, the guy up top is actually being empathetic, not a pig. But you have to understand these things. You have to share them so people understand. But it's really, really complicated and time consuming to explain every one of them.
I love that. That goes back to number 2, right? Transparency. And number 1, get your ass out of your office and go sit down with the people on the front line and talk about, you said negative word association. What are the things what are your misperceptions? How do you perceive things? Let me tell you from my perspective. If you were me, if you were the guy cutting the checks and having to make these decisions, here's what's behind it. So you did everything that we just talked about in this episode. You got out of your office.
Yep.
You're sitting down in front of people who always don't have they don't get the love that you give to salespeople. Like,
no.
Salespeople get a lot of your attention because that's the lifeblood of your business that keeps everyone paid. So it's easy to ignore the warranty or the maintenance staff. You're getting out, you're talking to them, you're giving them transparency, you're creating alignment, you're giving them context. You're literally doing all 4 of the things that we just talked about on this call, because that's how you drive a sense of urgency. When people feel like they're on the inside and they're not on the outside of the closed door meetings that are happening all the time, they are more in tune to want to roll their sleeves up and say, I'm going to go give everything for this job because my job matters. My job connects to the mission of this company and the company's health and what we're doing for people.
There's another side of this too, and I think this is really important. These aren't people who have urgency problems. They're not salespeople. They're not commissioned. It's not an urgency thing. But so you can take that from an urgency or a sales perspective. It permeates through every part of business. It permeates through every part of just human culture. It's everybody. So it doesn't matter. And sometimes it can be dressed up as urgency, and sometimes it can be dressed up as something completely different. So the reason I wanted to make sure we really talked about this is because the solution is usually the same no matter what. It's getting in front of people, having empathy, making sure they understand that they're being heard. Same thing with sales customers. The star of the show needs to be the person who you're talking to. It's the customer. It's the employee. Like, once they kind of feel that way, and it's like, okay, let's get these things on the table. Let's have a conversation about it. And then the next piece is, hey, when do we want to do this again? Like, was this helpful? Is there anything you'd like to learn that we didn't talk about? You're making them insiders. And the selfie thing, what it did is it made the customer and the staff kind of become one, and it made things more human. But you have to pick the right vehicle, but it's the same process. It's the same result. Like, how do you become heard and understand that you're valuable? And if you do those things, some of the other stuff slips away. Your job satisfaction goes up. The price of groceries didn't go down, but what you're doing, you're believing in it. And then you have a little bit of optimism about what you're doing and how you show up is different. And if you do all those things, well, the net result for the company is better. And that has an opportunity to unlock new kind of avenues or channels to chase.
I love it. That is a fantastic wrap up from the best color man in the business, Frankie Cava. If this was a helpful episode to you, we hope that you have some sense of urgency and get into that 5-star review with some nice comments.
Mash that like and subscribe button.
Mash that like button, mash that subscribe button. If you're on YouTube, turn on your notifications so you can find it. Make sure you say some nice things about Frank. Few people have been really giving me too much love lately. Frank's got feelings too, and he's a big part of the show. I want him to feel important. I want to link context and alignment to Frank here too. So
hey, and let's do a selfie.
Frankie, good to see you, homie. Go somewhere else with that Brunello $2,000 cashmere sweater of yours.
That is off channel, sir.
See you, buddy.